including my presentation, which I'm coordinating. And this video has already been sent to the ICA, where around the same time, in one of their venues, they're going to present the video presentations. What we will now do is play the video which incorporates the presentations by each one of you. And after the video presentation is over, may I request the panelists to be with us for a while and deal with specific questions or comments that the audience through virtual mode may have. So I'm requesting my technical team to now play the video. Welcome and thank you for participating.
Hello and very good afternoon, and welcome to all the distinguished delegates of the International Communication Association. We at the regional hub of the ICA in Manipal have evolved the presentation into three major themes, one of which is media systems and structures in South Asia. In doing so, we recognize not only the diversity, but also the issues and problems involved in making comparisons with the respective systems. Therefore, we highlighted certain parameters to our distinguished resource persons in these countries and asked them to offer a perspective on the theme, i.e., media systems and structures in South Asia. My presentation will focus on India based on my work done in the context of the BRICS media study. Certain common frameworks that we can identify are issues pertaining to access, regulation, media fraternity, and structures of both government and private sector. India, as all of you know, has gone through a colonial phase in which the foundations of media systems, particularly the print media, and to some extent broadcasting, were laid. Upon independence, like many other nations, it embarked upon its own definition of what its media ought to be. Here, the initial leadership believed in separating the media into that of what it perceived as the liberal print media and inherited the state control over broadcasting. One distinguishing characteristic of the media system is the slow, inevitable, and obvious expansion of the media in Indian languages. Whenever we talk about media system, media scholarship focuses mainly on journalism and less on media and entertainment. Now, when we talk about media structures, we often try to look at the structures as in the overarching system that governs, let us say, broadcasting, the legacy media, that is the print media, and of course, of late, the digital media. India, for a long time, and even now, maintains a large public broadcasting system by way of Prasar Bharati, Doordarshan, and All India Radio. Whereas post liberalization, the broadcasting sector has also grown significantly in the private sector. The convergence brought about by reforms in telecommunication and advances in information and communication technologies and also networking have brought to the fore the digital media as well. For many media scholars, the print media's resilience and sustenance is no doubt a matter for observation and keen analysis. This is supported by the fact that the opportunities of the growth in literacy, the expansion into more and more markets, and the realization of the regional media to focus on the local have given enormous impetus to the growth and spread of the Indian language media. And also, the resilience of the print media. Of course, there have been severe setbacks during the COVID by way of loss of advertising, etc. However, it is to their credit that they did maintain a, a skeletal edition, but nevertheless maintained the delivery to the subscribers. Now, what do we make of the structures in India? Like all other countries, reforms have necessitated a spurt and growth of private media, which has also come within the framework of what we call as the corporate media, wherein both aspects of cross media ownership, horizontal and vertical integration are at play. The consequences of these forms of ownership have attracted a lot of criticism and analysis based on the arguments that the ownership structures do limit the public sphere and people's participation in democracy. However, the promise of social media spread and access initially gave a countervailing argument and proposition. That proposition was evidenced by the fact that India today is among the largest social media user base. What it also brought in this expansion was the euphoria for user generated content, leading to information dissemination practices, which by and large are described under the fake news syndrome. Now, the spread of fake news and corresponding variants of propaganda or at times hate speech have no doubt allowed for the state to come down heavily and at times indulge in what is often referred to as internet blocks or internet lockdowns. While various alternatives such as fact checking, etc., have come into play like any other country, the related concern is the state's anxiety to look at microblogging sites, both Twitter and to some extent Facebook came under intense scrutiny and were asked to comply with the regulations of the country. There are arguments for and against within the framework of freedom of the press. But nevertheless, the government has come up with a codification of digital media content and ethics. What then is the future? Many might ask. One is the reduction in institutional workforce as far as journalism is concerned. Two, the continued practices of ethical transgressions by the media organizations, as well as some journalists, has impacted or rather eroded the faith of the people in media. Amidst this, there is a polarization in the media landscape of what people call as government oriented and government supportive media and the critical media. While on the face of it, Indian mediascape looks very divergent and varied, certain undercurrents and underlying reasons may have to be examined when we look at media systems and structures in India. Thank you very much.
Hello everyone. I'm really happy for having this opportunity that I can talk about media structure in Afghanistan. In this 10-minute presentation, I would like to touch upon these four topics: media structure, discourse and participation, media freedom, and media perception. I'll start by media structure. The framework of media after the collapse of the Taliban in 2001, Afghanistan started to have a more liberal or free media comparing to the neighboring countries like Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Iran, Pakistan, or India, and China. So among all these regional or neighboring countries, Afghanistan was having relatively free or more liberal media. In terms of ownership, Afghanistan used to have two types of media. One was owned by the government, the state, and the second one was owned by the private sector. And Afghanistan didn't have any public media. However, in Afghanistan, the new media like social media or news websites or messaging apps, all those were easily accessible without any interruption or intervention by the government. But that time, particularly the private media used to receive a very generous funding from international communities. Of course, that fundings were not free. The media had to kind of promote the image of the donor countries or the donor organization. And also, they were also receiving a kind of strong support for programs related to democracy, related to democratic values, related to women rights, all those issues. The media could receive a great amount of money from covering those topics. And about the geographical spread, Afghanistan, before the takeover of the Taliban, Afghanistan used to have different type of media, particularly FM radios. You could listen or you could hear FM radios in almost in each corner of Afghanistan. But Afghanistan, when it comes to television or newspaper, that was highly confined to some let's say capital or some zonal offices like Kandahar, Herat, Mazar-e Sharif, or Jalalabad. But radios were widely accessible, but that was only FM radios. And the next topic is about the discourse and participation that is very relevant to today's Afghanistan, taken over by the Taliban last year in August. So today's Afghanistan and today's media, the dominant themes on medias are topics that are not honoring the Taliban. That is, surely media cannot cover issue that the Taliban or consider it very sensitive, or that they consider is like breaching the very core values that they have set, particularly after taking over the government. And the dominant frame, of course, is also somehow pro-Taliban, pro-regime, or a neutral. So media cannot criticize, or media cannot go beyond this neutral or pro. They cannot criticize. Their tunes and their frames are not, I would say, critical, that could discuss issues that people really want or that are very important. And public participation, same like media, public participation is also very limited. People really don't want to debate critically some important issues. It's not because they don't want, actually, but they cannot dare, because that would be a very risky thing, because we have experienced people who were critical. They have been muzzled, they have been tortured, they have been arrested, and most of those critical voices have already fled the country. And so that's the public participation is somehow try to pacify or normalize the current status quo. And again, women's participation is also very limited in two ways, because during the previous government, there were lots of female journalists who could easily appear on screen, debate some issues, present different type of programs, which doesn't exist anymore the way that they used to be. And the second one is Afghanistan used to have really critical voice among the female, so women could comment on different issues more critically. Particularly, they could express their views, they could share their problem. But in today's Afghanistan, women particularly can't dare, or they don't take that risk, because that's a risky thing in today's Afghanistan. And the other thing is about social media. Social media is similarly restricted or strictly monitored by the Taliban, but people who are Afghans but not living in Afghanistan, those are critical. They are talking about different issues more critically. And the good thing I would say is lots of those journalists who fled the country, they still have links, they still have sources, and in Afghanistan who are sending them all the very genuine fact, because people in Afghanistan cannot post themselves. So lots of those journalists are posting and writing or sharing those information they have been receiving from Afghanistan. So social media is a kind of platform that people could somehow see kind of critical voice or voice that are not these days available on mainstream media. So that's a kind of a good platform for today's in Afghanistan. There is third topic is about freedom of media or speech. Afghanistan used to be ranked highly in ranking in terms of freedom of speech. It was ranked 122nd and 121st, 118 in 2020, 19, or 18 respectively by Reporter Without Border, which was the highest in the region. But after the collapse of the government, the previous government, the republic, after the takeover of the Taliban, the freedom of media, I put it, redefined, so people cannot cross the limits that have been set by the Taliban, which are media cannot broadcast or cannot produce content that are against Islam and that are against the national interest, which are very vague terms, which are very vague definitions, no one understands. But that is kind of methods that they could restrict media. And 241 media outlets ceased to operate, stopped their offices, most of their journalists fled the country, and around 6,000 journalists have lost their jobs. These informations are from Reporter Without Border. And what I said before, lots of my informations are highly relied on people who are in Afghanistan. I'm just for information. I'm working on media ecosystem analysis. I'm in touch with journalists in Afghanistan, and that is my work is funded by an institution. Or in other way, I am working for that institution. So my information that I have received are very, I would say that the situation in Afghanistan are not good, very horrible. Lots of journalists are trying to censor themselves. They cannot take that risk because it's very risky. There are some sensitive issues these days, kind of taboos that media cannot cover. I just name three, but there are too many other issues as well. First one is conflict within the Taliban. There is kind of tussle, conflict, or tug of war type of things among the Taliban or over the leadership that media cannot dare to cover. But my sources, the people I have talked with, I have received those information from those people. And security incident, there is still widespread kind of incident against the Taliban, but media cannot cover it. And questioning the decisions of the top leadership, people cannot, or media cannot question those decisions made by the top leadership. Media perception, lots of peoples in Afghanistan receive news information from different sources like radios, TV, internet, mosque, community, and friend and families. Among the leading ones are friends and families and radios. That is about media perception. And I have conducted a very small questionnaires filled out by 71 netizens, people who are using internet. So the finding says that new reception on media are totally, those people say like 97% people say that they are receiving information through media. Those statistics you can read. I'm running out of time. And trust in media, although there is relatively, there used to be relatively good number of trust, but that trust started to deteriorate after the collapse of the Taliban. You couldn't see this chart that shows that people no longer trust media the way that they used to. That is, this one, the media trust after 15th of August 2001. That is the day the Taliban took over the country. So media trust have been deteriorating, particularly after the collapse of the government. So that's it from my side. I'm sorry I took 11 minutes. I'll be more than happy for receiving questions. I will try to be virtually online when this presentation is played. Thank you very much for your attention.
Hello everyone, this is Dr. Abu Vian from the University of Dhaka, Bangladesh. The objective of my presentation is to talk about the media system in Bangladesh. So Bangladesh has a burgeoning media sector with multimedia platforms operating relentless services. The media sector underwent massive transformation since the mid-1990s. Neoliberalization, accompanied by satellite and digital technologies, shook the entire media system. However, the media system is still in flux, with new television channels and streaming platforms popping up every now and then. Helene and Mancini identified 4 key components of a media system that include the structure of the media market, political parallelism, professionalization, and the role of the state. So I'll use this Helene and Mancini framework to talk about Bangladeshi media system. So let's talk about the expansion of the media market. So Bangladesh has a multimedia environment where the press, electronic media, films, and digital media services operate. So let's talk about newspaper first. Although newspaper started its journey in this country during the British colonial rule, the major proliferation of the print media happened since the early 1990s when the country returned to democratic rule. So by March 2022, the total number of registered daily newspapers in the country was 1,274. Out of these daily newspapers, 490 are registered in Dhaka city alone, while 784 are outside Dhaka. So newspapers are published in two languages, Bangla and English. The largest circulating Bangla daily sells around 0.55 million copies per day, while the highest circulating English daily sells around 45,000 copies. So if you think about the population of the country, the number of circulation, seems very small. However, these days, many people read news online. So electronic media, especially, the broadcasting began its journey in the mid 1960s during the Pakistani regime, and until the mid 1990s, the country had the state-owned television and the state-owned radio as the only broadcast channels. In the late 1990s, the government licensed private television channels with a view to turning the one-channel environment into a multi-channel one. Alongside the state-owned BTV, 33 private television channels are now in operation. Out of these channels, 8 are 24-hour news channels. The government also has approved 14 IPTVs. So with the launch of Digital Bangladesh, the Information Society initiative adopted by the Awami League government in 2009 contributed to the expansion of internet facilities across the country. The number of internet users was 53 million by January 2022 with a penetration rate of 31.5%. Many people use social media for networking and entertainment purposes. Out of the social media, Facebook dominates. So number of Facebook users by January 2022 was 45 million people. So 26.8% of the total population and 85% of the total internet users, use Facebook. YouTube is in the second position with 34.5 million users, and it amounts to 20.6% of the total population and 65.6% of the total internet users. Instagram and Twitter also has a small following in this country. So most people use social media on mobile phones. The country had 178.5 million mobile connections by early 2022, with many people having multiple connections. So during the COVID-19, the film industry has been hit severely. The moribund film industry has been jolted by COVID-19. The number of film released in the year 2019-2020 was only 29, and no film was released in the year 2020 to 2021. The number of cinema theaters also declined in 2020. So 2020, the number of theaters stood at 194, while the number of theaters was 1,200 in 2010. So there are many streaming platforms operating in this country, including local, regional, and global ones, and the streaming platforms actually posing a tremendous challenge to the television and film industry. So Local streaming channels include Binge, Bioscope, Bongo, Banglaflix, Teleflix, Chorky, and many others. There are also regional, primarily Indian streaming channels having subscribers in this country. They include Hoichoi, at the times Z5. And out of the global streaming channels, Netflix, Prime Video, and Hulu also have their subscribers in this country. So we are observing a technological convergence in the country, especially the convergence between the legacy and new media. So for example, 92 dailies have government-approved online news portal where daily version of the newspaper and the updated news are available almost for free of cost. So most television channels have their websites, Facebook pages, and YouTube channels to advertise their programs and to get, audience feedback. Almost all the cell phone companies have their own OTT platforms, which offer some contents free of cost to their subscribers. Okay, so if we look at the media ownership pattern, so in the newspaper industry is totally privatized. So it was privatized in the late 1990s by selling off all the state-owned newspapers. The broadcasting industry has both private and public ownership. So broadcasting industry was liberalized by licensing private television channels in the late 1990s. The broadcast sector, since the 1990s, broadcast sector has privately owned television channels operating alongside the state-owned channels. So new media services have flourished in the private sector. As a result of the privatization and liberalization, the Bangladeshi media sector witnessed horizontal integration. Many prominent business houses have expanded their reach to media business. Major business groups owning newspapers and television include Bosundara Group, Jamuna Group, Bexim Group, and Hamim Group, Square Group, and Transcom Group Limited. So, political parallelism. Helen and Mancini have defined political parallelism as the degree and nature of the links between the media and political parties, or the extent of the reflection of the major political divisions in society by the media system. From that point of view, Bangladeshi media demonstrates a high degree of political parallelism. The print and electronic media owners and managers have strong political connections. Some are pro-government, while some are anti-government. Journalist unions are also split according to the party lines. Journalistic practices. So journalism is yet to develop as a secure profession. Bright minds shy away from journalism as it is marked by a lack of job security and guarantee of regular wages. Although journalists are guided by the motto of objective journalism and protecting public interests, there are many instances where journalists indulge in self-censorship to serve their political ideologies or to protect the business or political interest of the owner. So, role of the state. The Bangladeshi state performs three roles in the media sector. It provides subsidies, it owns media outlets, and works as a regulator. The state subsidizes the press by allocating advertisements and supplying newsprint at low cost. It owns and operates broadcast media. Except the press, the other media are heavily regulated in the country. So Bangladesh has medium-specific law for regulation, and in the absence of an independent regulator, the Information and Broadcast Ministry regulates the electronic and online media. In case of the social media, the ministry works in collaboration with the Bangladesh Telecom Regulatory Commission. So the Printing Press and Publication Act of 1973 is used to regulate the newspaper industry. The National Online Media Policy of 2017 is used to regulate the online media. The National Broadcast Policy 2014 is used to regulate the broadcast media, while the Digital Security Act of 2018 is, used to regulate digital crimes and crimes or offense occurred in the cyberspace. The government is also in the process of making two more laws, one for regulating the social media and the streaming services, while the other one is for digital security. So that's all about the Bangladeshi media system. If you have any questions or queries, I can, try to answer those. Thank you for listening.
Hello, everyone. My name is Bhanu Acharya, currently affiliated to the University of Ottawa and St. Paul University, Canada. I'm an author, trainer, researcher, and professor of journalism, communication, and media studies. Recently, we have published an edited volume, The Global Perspective on Journalism in Nepal, which has 18 chapters and involves 21 scholars of media and journalism. In this book, we have tried to critically assess Nepal's journalism scenario from professional, academic, socio-economic, and technological perspective. My presentation today is based on the same book, published on April 2022. Here you can see a comparative understanding of news media scenario of Nepal compared between the year 2001 and 2021. Here in the table, we can see an unprecedented growth of Nepali media, especially radios, televisions, and massive proliferation of online news portals. For example, in 2001, there were 230 daily newspapers. In 2021, 689, means 2.99 times growth, almost triple. Here you can see radio station. In 2001, 9 radio stations were licensed during then for the broadcast. In 2021, there were 1130 licenses were issued. It means 125 times more. Similarly, there were 3 television channels in 2001. In 2021, 210 channels, 70 times growth. So similarly, online news portals, estimated 10 were there in 2001 because there was no registration system. And in 2021, 2,830, means 283 times more. Now even these news portals are even more than 3,000 these days. So this shows the massive growth of news media in Nepal in all genres, in newspapers and radio and televisions and online news platform. With regard to the news media and ownership of Nepali media, as in other countries, there are 4 main news media genres. Number 1 is newspaper, and second is radio, third is television, and fourth is online news portals. Gorkhapatra, which was established in 1901 and still surviving and distributed across the country, is one of the 5 oldest surviving newspapers in South Asia. Radio started in 1950, television started in 1985, and online news portals started, not exactly portal, but newspapers were subbing content to online platforms starting 1995. The Kathmandu Post, one of the private broadsheet newspapers, is said to have the earliest online access in South Asia because they try to upload the content using some American online platform during that. Regarding the media ownership, there are 4 types of media in Nepal. The first is the state-run media such as Gorkhapatra, Radio Nepal, Nepal Television, and National News Agency. Gorkhapatra has other outlets like the Rising Nepal, Muna, a children magazine, or like Yuva Manch, the youth magazine, and one literary magazine like Madhupur. And Radio Nepal has 26 relay stations. Nepal Television has 5 different other channels, regional and English news channel and entertainment channels. And National News Agency has a nationwide network of reporters, and they have a huge infrastructures to collect, select, and publish information. The second kind of media ownership is commercial non-government media. As I already mentioned, that includes newspapers, radios, televisions, online portals, and most of them are private. More than 1,000 newspapers, 1,100 radio, again, same thing. Similarly, there is third kind of media ownership, that is cooperative media. Many of them are non-profitable. They are established by a group of community members, and they do journalism for social well-being. So Sagarmatha Radio, for example, you can see here, community radios. Nepal is one of the pioneer community radios in the South Asia, because in 1997, Sagarmatha Radio of Nepal is the earliest and first radio of such kind in the entire southeastern region. And there are community televisions and community newspapers in Nepal as well. The fourth kind of media ownership, the fourth category of media ownership, is self-employed media outlets. Self-employed media outlets are often run by a small group of media professionals, having media ownership and editorial responsibility with the same person or persons. This kind of media are often considered as opinionated and sensational. Still, they are very popular, and hundreds of such kind of media are in different communities across the country. Sustainability issue is really a challenging issue in Nepal. As noted earlier, more than 13,000 journalists and thousands of news media outlets are running in the country that has 29 million population. So as a country with a 29 population having a lot of media outlets, when there are a lot of media outlets and a lot of journalists, so sustainability of news media is always a big question in a country like Nepal. In the book we recently published, we have carefully assessed sustainability issues in different chapters. Currently, there is a very limited support from the industry due to COVID-19, and there are other socio-political factors like political instability and the growing number of opinionated media. So here you can see 3 different chapters we have published: Diasporic Online Media, a study of professionalism and sustainability, experiencing the sustainability challenges by Nepal's local radio stations, and sustainability of online news media in Nepal. So sustainability is really a huge problem these days. Technological transformation is another important characteristics in Nepal as well as in the globe. Hundreds of weekly and dozens of daily newspapers turn to be online only publications due to the sustainability issues. Most of the televisions have adopted high definition version and have their own online and YouTube channels to liberate audience to choose a comfortable time to watch their programs. Online news media outlets have aggressively adopting multimedia approach by establishing audio-visual studio and producing audio-video content and competing with traditional televisions. Regarding journalistic practice, ethics, and professional ecosystem, Nepal is Nepali media landscape is always an interesting place for that. Nepali journalists and news media adopt a universal code of ethics developed by the Federation of Nepali Journalists and the Press Council Nepal. As stated earlier, many news media in Nepal are oriented to political and market interest. For example, state-run media are government's propaganda machines, and corporate media produce content based on cost-benefit analysis. With regard to the regulatory framework of news media in Nepal, Press Council Nepal is the main mechanism to regulate media practices. It's a quasi-judicial body. However, it's not an independent body, and there are a lot of political appointments and interventions. It is not very much effective due to its legal mandate, resource limitations, and limited presence across the country. There are other non-government NGOs and private institutions also to regulate, to watch, and to suggest the media performance, but they are not legally mandated to regulate and monitor media performance. And finally, based on our studies about Nepal's news media as professional growth and sustainability, we found that journalists, media owners, and policymakers were highly confused and lost direction to handle media outlets effectively because of unprecedented growth of news media outlets, technological transformation from traditional to digital platform, sustainability issues because more media and journalists and in a limited number of 29 million populations in that population, and frequently changing policy issues because of the political instability and growing partisan interest in media and journalism. And consequently, media content have made audience more confused and reluctant than before. So this is not just the phenomena in Nepal. We found in our studies similar phenomena are in different other countries as well. And finally, thank you very much for watching this presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Buyan. Thank you, Hazrat. Thank you, Bhanubat Bhattacharya, for the presentation. As I said earlier, we could have organized this as a round table, but the structure of the conference and also our syncing it with ICA Paris had certain limitations. I do apologize if the dynamics of consultation and discussion had not been part of this. But however, if all of you are there, we could spend at least a few minutes in discussing either certain common issues or even comparative issues. Now, let me open it with Professor Buyan. In terms of South Asia and also the past attempts with regard to, let us say, a SARC media system. We had theories of media acting as bridge makers among and between countries. Of late, as all of you are aware, there are many bilateral issues that have cropped up. How far do you think this pan South Asian media networking or even people to people communication is possible? You could take this question, and I would request Bhattacharya and Hazrat also to give their views since you have already presented your respective countries' presentation, we will not deal with it. They are there for everybody to see. But I would like to pose this question and request you to flag off the discussion. Professor Bhuyan.
Thank you, Professor Sanjay, for your question. I see a real opportunity to develop a pan South Asian media networks. I regret that we should have developed it long ago, and I think we should have publications on South Asian media systems. Maybe the panel which you have organized here today, it will give us an opportunity to think about it. But all the South Asian countries share same culture. Maybe we have some linguistic differences, but in terms of other issues of culture, we have a strong similarity, right? We also have differences, no doubt about that, but I would emphasize on the similarities, because if you look at the beginning of the media, what do you call legacy media or mass media, it almost started during the British colonial rule. This is also a starting point for us, that all of us in South Asia, underwent colonial rule. So British colonial legacy, which we are carrying out still in terms of formulating media laws and media system, that could give us a starting point to develop a critique of the South Asian media system and to bind South Asian media systems together. So that would be one aspect. Another thing we have to be, uh, take notice of, that the relationship between our people is always there, but sometimes it's get affected by the borders. The relationship between the countries, especially the political relationship between different countries in South Asia, sometimes create obstacles toward developing a pan South Asian cultural and social networks and media networks. If I remind you about the even the very organization called SARC, the SARC has become obsolete or ineffective because of conflict between Pakistan and India. So if that conflict could be resolved, South Asia could progress together, could develop, or further strengthen our unity. So there are, plenty of opportunities for collaborative works between media scholars in South Asian countries. So I would conclude here by thanking you for taking this lead. I think you are one of the leading media scholars in South Asia, and I think you are senior to many of us. So you have taken a good lead. I think if we all cooperate with you, and if we all are agreed, then we can move forward for getting something published on South Asian media system. So that would be a very good starting point. Thank you once again.
Professor Bhattacharya, would you like to offer some views either on the question or your take on the question or the relevance of the question itself? Thank you. Professor Bhattacharya, you are muted, I think.
And
please unmute yourself.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the question, Professor Sanjay. My name is Bhanu and Acharya. It's not Bhattacharya, because in West Bengal and Bangladesh, Bhattacharya is more popular. But Bhanu and Acharya is separate. When writing together, it looks like Bhattacharya. That's fine. Anyway.
Sorry about that. Sorry about that.
It's okay. Yeah, I can go with some of the ideas raised by Professor Abu Bhuyan. There are definitely some cultural connection in South Asia, and there are already some developed networks like ICA. It is being developed, not much. And there is one South Asian media chapter, something I'm hearing about that, and they're also organizing some program in Nepal, in India, and maybe in other countries as well. South Asian media chapter, I heard about that. And there is another IAMCR, and there are some IAMCR ambassadors in India and in other countries. And there used to be one SAPMA Media, that is South Asian Free Media Association, that is trying to be parallel with the SARC. But these days, I'm not seeing much activity on that. So there are and were some kind of media networks in South Asia, but the efforts are not enough for tackling all kind of challenges. So we need to do some more efforts. But while doing that kind of efforts, we need to have some kind of more conversation among people. Because, for example, I myself and Padma Rani, we are trying to build a book, and then we're looking for somebody from Afghanistan to contribute. And the situation in Afghanistan is really inaccessible, and we are looking people outside Afghanistan, Afghani diaspora in other countries. So this kind of framework, this kind of discussions and symposium, they can definitely help us connect. So because as Professor Abu said, because of the political borders and barriers and their kind of hindrances to access, we need to use this digital platform as an opportunity to build that kind of virtual connection, so that at least we can meet the objectives of building a kind of South Asian media fraternity. And so we can share our understanding, we can share our best practices, and we can write, publish, discuss, and develop our own discourse. That is the important part. And this ICA Manipal Hub, I love this Manipal Hub, because even though ICA is working here in Paris, and many Indians and other scholars from Nepal, they are now attending in Paris, but we are being in Manipal Hub. For example, I'm in Canada. I could go way cheaper in Paris than India for now. But this platform is giving a good opportunity. So we need more and more platform, either from ICA or IMCA or SAPMA or Asian Media Chapter, whatever. So when we do more and we can have a good connection and we can discuss and we can share ideas. So for example, everybody, not just the ICA Manipal, everybody of us, me, myself, and different professors in different countries, we should start and initiate this kind of work in a different platform, and we can try to engage more and more people, and so that we can build a common understanding and we can share the best practices. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hazrat Bahar. I know the situation is fluid and you have made your presentation, but still I would like to ask you, would you like to throw some light on either the comparative or the context-specific issues that we can carry forward in terms of our discussion on South Asia media system?
Yeah.
I know you have been academically involved in many of them.
Thank you very much. I'm happy for having this opportunity. I'm sorry, I have just recently got a flu and my sound is not that much transparent. Anyway, with regard to the questions that you posed earlier, yeah, that is, I would say, one of the best idea. But practically speaking, if there is, I may not have properly understood the questions, or this is just my perception. If this is like, if it is possible to have kind of like South Asian type of system, that is one idea. And if you're examining the practicality of that idea, that seems to be a little bit difficult. You know, one is like we should have, one is what is practically happening. As far as my understanding, the overall scholarship, either if it is, for example, let's say in India or in Pakistan, in Bangladesh, Nepal, that overall media scholarship is highly politicized and highly dominated by the state narrative. As long as we are in that narrative, I think that kind of collaboration might be, I don't say that it is impossible, but that would be a little bit difficult. So I think the main job of a scholar, media scholar for the time being, is that to challenge the overall status quo and come up with what you said, pan South or pan South Asian media system. That's very, I would say, a vivid and vital issue for the time being, you know, because media could play a very constructive role in terms of bridging the space, bridging the gap between the countries in among South Asian countries. That is very important. But when it comes to its practicality, I little bit in doubt that, because given the very political problem within the countries or between the country, not within, but between the countries. For example, let's say Afghanistan used to have a very harsh time with Pakistan, with particularly Pakistan, and the same Pakistan used to have, even now, have a very diverse of interest with India and with Bangladesh. Also, as long as that scholarship and the narrative is dominated by the state, I think we will find that a little bit difficult to come up with what you propose. But it doesn't mean that it is impossible to come up with that pan South Asian state media system. It is a good initiative. That initiative is already, it's always an initiative that should be taken. I think it's not too late. You could be the leader, or your institution can take this lead. It's a very timely and important issue, but as long as we are in the state narrative, we are confined in the state narrative, as long as we are in the political kind of tussle between this country, its practicality is a little bit, for me, is not so highly likely. If you would like to want me to talk about Afghanistan media, I didn't understand the second question. Did you want me to talk about some context of Afghanistan? I could talk about if we have time, or if there is any other questions, I will be more than happy to take those questions and share my views.
Particularly didn't probe too much into the context specific nature of the media, because you had explained about the transitional nature and the dynamics of the media and the system. So I didn't want to probe that aspect as of now. But I was looking at, for example, when we were trying to train journalists from Afghanistan, I'm talking about way back when I was at the first batch of Afghan trainees were done at IMC about 20 years ago.
Yeah.
What we feel, and this question applies to Banu Acharya as well as Professor Abu Buyan, is the limitations and strengths of frameworks of understanding the media functions in our countries. You see, for example, the notion of freedom, the notion of independence. And Professor Buyan mentioned about the press freedom index. There are a lot of debates within the countries about this universal dynamics of what media is, ought to be, and what is its relevant to society. So can we as a group look at the specifics and deal with our students in looking at what the media actually is, what it is capable of doing, and try to give a context specific orientation. By this, I do not mean that we have to at this media specific, be defensive, but we can be more meaningful in terms of understanding each other, at least in South Asia. Is that or have I? Yes, Banu Acharya, can you, is that a possibility where you said that Manipal can be a hub? Can we, for example, have a South Asian media system framework for students of each other countries as a course component at the master's level or at the bachelor's level? Can we do that?
Yes, yes, sir. What I can say here is, for example, in South Asia, most of the countries, they don't have the comparative teaching system. They simply teach the way they like. This independent, for example. So, for example, some media scholars or scholars of PhD or something, they should at least go to some universities in India or Bangladesh or Pakistan or somewhere else and have at least one semester or some kind of understanding in master's or PhD level, so that they can understand that they can compare. South Asian media system is completely a kind of diverse in terms of press freedom as well. For example, Nepal is stood 76 in this year, India is 152 or something else, and Afghanistan maybe 155 or somewhere else. So when we have a people to people connection, then they definitely not only learn, they also teach something. They also give some kind of ideas so that they can kindle a kind of hope in terms of press freedom, in terms of understanding, in terms of the not the theoretical perspective, but the real life system. So what I want, especially in South Asia, for example, Nepal has the Tribhuvan University, one of the largest university in the world, a lot of students. So we can start from the journalism department of Nepal's Tribhuvan University to some university like in India, maybe Manipal or something else. So exchange program, that can be 15 days exchange program or 1 month or 1 semester. That definitely develops a people-to-people relation. And so that, for example, when these students can come back here in their country of origin, they continuously build and evolve the understanding what they learned in a different socio-political environment. For example, here I find in the University of Ottawa, some Bangladeshi student, some African student, some other students are coming just for 15 days, for 1 month, for 1 semester. And definitely that can give them a kind of life perspective. First of all, it is very important. Somebody should lead, somebody should start connecting with different universities in different countries. And there should be some kind of student interaction exchange program. That should be, I believe, in master's and PhD level, so that these are the immediate rising emerging scholars, so they can immediately influence in the market. It's not I'm talking about 9, 10, 11, 12 or undergrad. In the first batch, at least in master's degree or in the PhD level, there is one university, South Asian University in India. Some Nepali students and some other students also are learning there. I don't know how they're working because I'm not familiar with them. Maybe we have to explore in different universities how they can working and how we can collaborate, how we can share practices, how our scholars, our professors can go and teach their 15 days, 10 days program. That can make a huge difference, definitely. So I'm really interested if we move forward this way. Even though we can use the virtual platform, for example, I'm taking some guest lectures in the University of Moscow from here. So I can do that anywhere. So we can work in that way. For example, in Afghanistan, inside Afghanistan, access is difficult. But if we try to use the virtual connection, and that is cheap, that is accessible, that is immediate, and that is effective. So we can do this way. This is my take right now.
So Boyan, would you like to have some views on this? You already flagged it, but I just wanted to know, is there something specific you would like to add? You're muted, Professor Boyan. Kindly unmute yourself.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I was muted, you know. Yeah, no, I think we have initiated the discussion, you know, we need to have a South Asian approach to media and communication, you know, to be very frank. I'm also very critical of this Western indexes, you know, RSF indexing our media freedom or Freedom Foundation indexing our media freedom. Yeah, I agree with Hazrat that we have to be critical about our state or our government narratives. At the same time, we also have to be very critical about the quote unquote international narratives. To give you an example here, you know, I was pretty surprised last year, you know, when I saw that Bangladeshi media index where Bangladeshi media freedom was indexed behind Myanmar. So I think some of you know that what is the situation in Myanmar. So that example tells me that there is an international political economy behind this kind of ranking and indexing. So our job would be to develop a South Asian framework to understand South Asian media system. So how do we do that? Already Professor Vanu Acharya has recommended exchange programs. He also talked about, having exchanging, lectures. This could be one way, since we have the blessings of the digital media, we can organize lectures, no doubt about that. But I would also suggest that we take research projects, we go for collaborative works, so maybe we can go for comparative studies or individual studies, because almost all the regions, if you look at IMCR and ICA, you'll see that Latin Americans have their own approach. All the Latin American countries are having their publications, pan Latin American studies. If you look at Europe has this, uh, pan European studies. So we can have Asian studies, and at the same time we can have South Asian studies. So exchange of scholars, exchange of students, at the same time exchange of research works. There could be virtual conferences, virtual presentations, research presentations, among the South Asian countries. So I think we can do it if we are serious. We have to take many more people on board in this initiative, and I would suggest that we move forward from here. Thank you.
Uh, Dr. Bahar, would you like to have your last word on this, please?
Yeah, I'll
Whatever
just
is this.
briefly, yeah, I'll just say that it's a very nice idea. So far, we have not received any contribution from either the government or the regional institutions like SARC, although they had an organization, SAPMA, they were supporting, but that was more practical in journalism rather than on research level. I think what I have heard is a kind of like expectation that gives me kind of like hopes that yes, it is possible, and if that could be supported, again I would say from a very institutionalized ways, it might be difficult because regionally speaking, universities and institutions, they have not received lots of fund for kind of supporting these type of like intrastate or regional kind of initiatives. But if there is a will, if there is intention, if Manipal could just propose and support that ideas, I think this is a very nice idea, and it's very possible given this diverse technological support and advancement. I think it's possible in terms of collaboration, in terms of exchange program, in terms of other research project. I think it's a good idea if that could be initiated.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions from the participants? Any specific question to our panelists? We don't have any questions in the chat box, so I'm opening it up in case somebody wants to come in. Because this is a rare occasion when scholars from these many countries are with us today. All right. On that note, on behalf of Manipal Institute of Communication, and also our main supporters, ICA, I thank each one of you for your presentation, and we look forward, and who knows, Manipal might like Bano Acharya's book on the Nepal, very comprehensive book that he has introduced. We may continue the tradition and look at a South Asian media compilation along some of the parameters, and give a better context specific understanding of the media system. Thank you very much for being with us today, and we wish you the very best and look forward to your continued presence in the next 2 or 3 days of our ICA Hub. Thank you so much. And I think it's right for me to say good night to no or good morning. I don't know because Banu
It's
Acharya
a good
is
afternoon here,
in the morning.
12:23 in Ottawa,
Good
Canada.
afternoon. And Hazrat Bahar, are you in China or where are you now?
Doctor, I'm in Germany now.
Oh, you
It's
are in
almost,
Germany. All
yeah,
right, all right.
kind of
So
early
not
evening.
okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, and God of the bless you and wish you all the
That's right.
best.
All right.
Thank you
Thanks
so
for
much.
Thank you.
giving us
Bye-bye.
an
Thank
opportunity.
you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sanjay.